How's it going, everybody? In this video, we're going to continue our BGP section by talking about getting BGP up and running. And what I want to do is just reiterate real quickly what it is we're going to be doing in the for the deployment, and then go through those steps. So first and foremost, what we're planning on doing, let me go ahead and get it out of the way, is we're going to go and create a new loopback on vEdge1 and vEdge2. Obviously, we're going to do vEdge1 because it's all CLI based out of the gate. Then we're going to advertise that into OSPF. Once it gets advertised into OSPF, switch 16 will learn that, and then what will end up happening is switch 16's loopback will also be advertised into OSPF. What will end up happening is we'll be able to form an iBGP peering between vEdge1 and switch 16, and we'll be able to take any routes that vEdge1 has learned and be able to propagate those down to vEdge1 or to switch 16. We're also going to do the same thing, but via templates and the same thing. We're going to create a loopback interface. We're going to tie it to the template for vEdge2. We'll advertise that inside of OSPF, and then we'll make sure to set up an iBGP peering, which is switch 16. So there will be two iBGP peerings set up on between these two routers. Once that is complete, we'll go ahead and we'll redistribute OSPF into BGP for the routes that have been learned, and we'll talk about why that is. And then all the routes from here, here, and here will come across, and then will start to show up over here on switch 16 as iBGP routes. They'll be internal BGP routes. Then what we'll do on switch 16 is we'll actually bump up the OSPF AD from 110 to 201 so that it's less preferred than BGP, and then all those routes will get installed into the routing table of switch 16 as BGP routes. And then once we do that, we'll be able to, in the next video, go through and actually do the routing policy. So we'll be able to create a local policy on vEdge1 and vEdge2 through vManage. We'll push that config down to the local vEdges, and we'll talk about how to manipulate the routing and stuff like that with the local control policies. Because the cool thing about it is it's not a centralized control policy that affects every location, or potentially could affect every location. We're going to be specific to the individual device with a localized control policy, which actually has to be pushed down. The policy itself has to be pushed to the device, and then once it's pushed to the device, then it can be called from the individual routing process at the device level. So we'll talk about how that all that stuff comes into play. It's not terribly difficult to follow, but if you've never dealt with it before and you're new to it, it's just like, huh? So yeah, let's go ahead and dive into the config and get all that squared away. So the first thing I'm going to do is clear the screen. I'm going to go ahead and get out of the way, and I'm going to pull up Secure CRT. So on vEdge1, we're going to start here, and we're going to begin by setting up the loopback. So the very first step is global config, VPN1, interface, loopback 0. And the IP address here is going to be 10.1.0.1/32. Don't forget to no shut the port. I've made that mistake a few times and it's come back to bite me. Now that we have that in play, we're going to type in router, OSPF, area 0, and then advertise interface loopback 0 into OSPF. So now that I've got that done, let's go ahead and commit the config. And then we're going to go over to switch 16, and we're going to do a show IP route. So we should see, momentarily, we should see the 10.1 route come across, which we do right there. Okay, so that means that we've got at least that coming across. I'm going to go back to vEdge1, and I'm going to begin the BGP config, which is going to be BGP 65012. And then I'm going to say neighbor of 10.1.0.16. Update source is going to be loopback 0. The remote AS is going to be 65012, so it's going to be an iBGP peering. We're going to set the next hop to be self. Now you might ask, why do we need to care about next hop self? What does that really do? Well, it's sort of not necessary, but sort of necessary at the same point in time. because if we learned in any eBGP routes from anywhere else in the network, for example, what will end up happening is the eBGP updates don't actually update the next hop themselves. So we'd have to set the iBGP next hop to vEdge1. I'm throwing it in there because of the fact that it's something that I'm accustomed to doing, not always necessary. So if I was to leave it off, for example, let me go ahead and just not throw that in for good measure. What I'm going to go ahead and do now is I'm going to type an address family IPv4 unicast, so that it enables that particular address family on this particular neighbor. I'm going to exit out a couple times and then type an address family IPv4 unicast. I'm going to redistribute OSPF. Now the reason why I have to redistribute OSPF and not OMP, because if we do a show IP route VPN1, do show IP route VPN1, you're going to see that a lot of the routes that I'm learning them in via OSPF, right? Notice that all these routes, I do see them in here, but they're OMP, there's no information available to them. So for the routes that are coming in that actually have a value next to them that are in the F, S, or what they refer to as the, where is it? It's in the fib and it's selected. Those are the routes that I want to redistribute, not the OMP routes. So now that I've got that all in play, I'm going to do a show config so we can see the config. We're going to go VPN1, router BGP 65012, address family IPv4 unicast, redistribute OSPF, and then set up a peering to the neighbor. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to commit that config. And now what I have to go do is on switch 16, I have to set up the BGP config here. So go to global config, router BGP 65012. I'm going to type in no BGP default IPv4 unicast, which will prevent any automatic IPv4 unicast peerings from happening. By default, I have to enable them. So I'm going to type in neighbor of 10.1.0.1, remote AS of 65012. I'm going to specify the update source is going to be loopback 0. I'm going to enable the IPv4 address family on these particular this particular neighbor. This will get my neighbor adjacency up and running. And then as soon as that does happen, which will take a couple of seconds to do its thing, once it comes up, we will be able to learn a bunch of routes in from BGP. There it goes. And so what I'm going to do now is a show IP BGP summary. I am currently not learning any routes, but that will change after a short period of time. The routes usually take a couple seconds to come across. Let me just double check and make sure that I advertise correctly. Redistribute OSPF. Yep, they're all there. So hopefully they come across. Because right now we haven't learned any prefixes. I can also throw in, for good measure, a redistribute OMP. Commit that as well. I go back to switch 16, hit the up arrow. And for some reason it is show run section BGP. See why that's not coming across. I've got the activation going back and forth, which is what I want. All that looks good. Let me go back to vEdge1. Let's do show run VPN1 router BGP 65012. I've no shut that, which is what I want. All that looks good. Let's go back here. Interesting. Not coming across. Let me do a clear IP BGP star soft inbound. See if that has anything to do with it. This is a little unusual because of the fact that where iBGP peers, we should be receiving something. Let me go back to vEdge1 and let me show BGP routes VPN1. Okay, so I'm learning a bunch of stuff in here. It might have just taken some time for it to do its thing. Really weird. I'm learning stuff. Literally, there is stuff coming across. Let me just see what else. show BGP VPN, let's see, summary VPN1. We haven't received any prefixes from switch 16. Neighbors, VPN1. I do have an active session up, which is what I would expect to see. Summary. Nothing has been installed from them, but that's okay for switch 16 to not have that. That's really weird. Let me clear the table. Clear iBGP star. Bring down the peering and see if that doesn't trigger something, because I'm clearly learning routes. What I mean by that is we do a show IP route VPN1. I'm learning a bunch of routes in from a bunch of different places. And if I do a show BGP routes from VPN1, or I'm sorry, in VPN1, I'm learning a bunch of stuff. So if we look at 10.3, this is all stuff that we're being redistributed, and we can see the origin is incomplete. So if I know I'm learning things in redistributing those routes into BGP. So let's see if that has any effect on it. That is really weird. Really, really weird. Let me pause the video and see if I can't figure this out. So playing around with the configuration, you see I did a debug and then I cleared the config on this side, and I pushed it out, and I was looking at switch 16 and I got a precarious update and it says denied due to next hop is our own address, and so it doesn't go into specifics here as to what that particular issue is. So like we're getting some interesting updates here. So what I'm going to do here, and I can't say that I've ever seen this problem before, which is why I'm a little perplexed. What I'm going to do is I'm going to set the next hop on this neighbor to be next hop self. So let me go up here, VPN1, and paste this in router, and then BGP, and then set next hop self. Let me commit that change and see if that makes any difference. And okay, there we go. So next hop self was required for those routes to get propagated. So we're setting the updates in, and if I do show iBGP update, there we go. I have 19 updates. So next hop self is required in order for this to work. But if I do a show IP route, we're not installing those OSPF updates, or those updates as BGP. We're installing them as OSPF E2. I mean, there's technically nothing wrong with that, but in order to take advantage of the routing config, we have to change that up, right? So what I'm going to go do is on here, I'm going to go to global config underneath router OSPF1, and I'm going to say the distance here is going to be for OSPF for external routes. I'm going to say is going to be 201, and for intra area it's going to be 201, and for inter area it's going to be 201, just so that they're all along the same lines. So what's going to end up happening is all those routes are now going to get installed in the main table, and you just saw that. So by show IP BGP, those routes are now installed in the routing table. So show IP route, now we have a bunch of BGP routes in the routing table. So that's what we need to do on for vEdge 2 when we do its config. So that's really what the main case is here. So just to recap what we've done, we got the BGP peering up and running, right? We got that all squared away. I created a loopback, advertised it into BGP, or I'm sorry, OSPF. Got the BGP peering up and running, but we weren't propagating any routes. I didn't set the next hop self command just to show you that it was required. And then once I set the next hop and I verified that the routes were being received, but they were being denied to be added to the BGP table through the adjacency rib in buffer, if you will. There's part of the BGP process of when you receive routes in, if they don't pass the like sniff test initially, so like you have wait, local preference, you know, if the next hop isn't reachable, you don't install it. But if loop prevention kicks in, it's like, well, if it's my own next hop, I'm not going to believe it. So by changing the next hop to be another value, we're able to inject the routes, which we're good to go now on. So now what I'm going to go do is I'm going to change this up, and instead of going through the configuration like I have it now, we're going to go through vManage. So let me go ahead and pull up vManage, and we're going to go through and configure it this way. So this will take us a little bit of time to get it all squared away, but I promise that I'll try to go make it as painless as I can. So first thing we need to do is admin and admin. We need to log in. Go ahead and get rid of this. For some reason it always does that. Alright, so now we have that going for us. We're going to go to templates. And then on feature templates, we need to create a couple. Now I'm only going to be doing this to the dual site templates. So I need to add a template for loopback 0. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to create a template. vEdge cloud. I'm going to come down here to VPN interface. It says Ethernet, but it really isn't. So it's going to be vEdge _ dual site VPN1 int loopback 0. Copy that, paste it down here. We're going to no shut that port. The interface is going to be loopback 0. Let's try to get, there we go, loopback, and then we're going to say loopback 0. And then we're going to give it a static IP. The static IP we're just going to set is going to be global in this case because no other site is going to get this. But if other sites were going to get it, you would populate that information. Actually, let's go ahead and just do it device specific. We're going to type in VPN or VPN1 for the loopback. Let's do this. VPN1 _ loopback 0 IPv4 address. There we go. And then not going to be a tunnel, no NAT, no BRP, none of that stuff. And I'm going to go ahead and click on save. We just had to create the loopback. Now the loopback's created. Now I'm going to go underneath the OSPF. Let me go ahead and organize them real quick. I'm going to do the OSPF right here because you can see the type is OSPF. I'm going to add. I'm going to edit this guy underneath area. I'm going to add an interface. So under interface, I'm going to come in here and add interface, and the interface ID is going to be loopback, and it's going to be loopback 0, like that. I'm not going to do anything to it other than just advertise it in, and I'm going to save changes again, and now we're in good shape there. And I'm going to go ahead and click on update. That's going to cause a push to vEdge, the vEdge. Now if we come in here, we go to edit device template, we can see that it doesn't actually ask us for an address because, or does it? Actually, I need to call that from, I can't do that yet. I have to call the, let's go back to the OSPF template real quick. The OSPF template, if we come in here and we've got to put, sorry, so I did things a little bit out of order, or the logic was out of order, excuse me. So create the loopback first, tie it to the device template, then push the device template down with the updated loopback down to the down to vEdge 2. Once we have the loopback there, we can enable OSPF on it. Because until the loopback is there, you won't be able to call it from OSPF. So let's go do that real quick. We have the loopback here, right? If we come over here and we do this, we know the loopback is there. So we're going to go to the device template for dual device. We're going to come underneath here and edit. And what we'll do is we'll go underneath the service VPN and we're going to add an interface. So VPN interface, we'll choose the interface. We're going to just type in loopback 0 and we're going to click on update. Just by doing that alone will cause a push to the device. So I'll give that a couple of seconds to do its thing. I'm going to come in here and edit device template. We're going to scroll down and here's where we have to type in the IP address. So it's going to be 10.1.0.2/32. I'm going to click on update and then next, and then I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to configure devices, and we're going to go into the hurry up and wait game. So I'm going to pause while this is working. Alright, so the config was pushed, so we can just real quick verify that by coming in here to vEdge 2 and admin and then admin, and we can do a show run VPN1, and we'll see that loopback 0 has now been added. So now we'll come back over here to the templates, we'll grab the feature templates, and we'll come down to the OSPF template. Let's go ahead and reorder them. Click on the OSPF template, click on edit, and then what we're going to do is underneath area, we're going to go ahead and edit this. We're going to add a VPN interface, which is going to be, in this case here, loopback, and we'll say loopback 0. We're going to click on save changes, save changes again, and then update. And then what will end up happening is that information will get pushed down to the vEdge, and we're just going to go ahead and configure devices because we're just adding the loopback to OSPF. Alright, so we're going to do a show run VPN1 router OSPF, and we're going to see that loopback 0 has been added. Right, we're not doing anything fancy to it because it doesn't need anything fancy. If we come down here to switch 16 and we do a show IP route, we're going to see that we have an OSPF route. Sorry, right here. This BGP route is being learned via router 1. So it is pushing, which is no big deal. We're getting it pushed the way we need to. One of the things that I'm going to do is now set up the BGP configuration in order for us to do this setup. So normally, like for example on vEdge 1, if we look at the show run VPN1 router BGP 65012, normally I would never redistribute this much. So let me go ahead and try to clean this up just a little bit. So let's go underneath here, and I'm going to remove OSPF. So we should only have to redistribute OMP. Let me go ahead and no redistribute OSPF, and then we're going to go over to switch 16, and notice how all that stuff gets withdrawn. Let's do a show IP BGP summary. All of our routes are gone. So if we were to go back to vEdge 1 and type in no redistribute OMP, commit, and then let's redistribute OSPF just so we know what we need to have in there, and we'll recommit that. And then switch 16 will be able to learn the routes back again. So we'll be in good shape there. Now, because of the fact that we're going to have those routes coming in, now we have the 20 routes, we have a bunch of routes in the routing table, we're in really good shape, right? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go on here, I'm going to go to templates, I'm going to go to feature templates, and we need to create a BGP template. So I'm going to come underneath here, vEdge Cloud for BGP, and we need to come in here under here, type in vEdge underscore dual underscore site underscore VPN1 underscore BGP template. Okay, copy and paste that in. We're going to say that it is it's no shutdown, so we're going to leave that alone. And I'm not going to mess with any of this information right here because that's the way I want it. I'm going to say that the address family right now is maximum paths. We're not going to mess with that. We are going to redistribute. So we're going to come in here. We're going to choose the protocol. We're going to redistribute OSPF and click on add. So we want to explicitly redistribute that. If something else pops up, we can deal with that. But we're going to type in, click on new neighbor. The neighbor address we're going to say is going to be device specific. BGP neighbor address is fine with me. We go ahead and device specific. The remote AS, we're going to go ahead and say that's fine. We're going to say yes, we want to turn the address family on, and then we're going to choose IPv4 unicast. I'm not going to do anything else beyond that, and the reason why I'm throwing all these add-ons is because in following videos we're going to use the route policy capability to affect those routes. So we're going to go ahead and click on add once we get to that point. And make sure you click on add, or else it will, let me go get out of the way. It won't add if you don't put that in there. So we have our neighbor statement configured, and we're going to go ahead and click on save. So now we have our BGP peering squared away. I'm now going to go to the device template, click on dual site, grab the edit option here. And then I'm going to go down to Service VPN and I'm going to add BGP. I'm going to choose the BGP template, VPN1 for dual site, and click on Update. And that will get us in a good place to push the config. So we're going to go ahead and edit the device template because we're going to have to populate some information. The ADS number is going to be 65012. The neighbor address is going to be 10.1.0.16. And the remote AS is 65012. Okay, so basically it's an iBGP peering. I'm going to go ahead and click on Update and then click on Next. And then I'm going to, let's do a quick view of the config diff to make sure that we understand what's going on and get all that stuff squared away. So let's take a look at the config diff now. So come down here to VPN1. We can see that we're doing BGP 65012. We're redistributing OSPF, and we're all that stuff. What we'll have to do is set the next top self. I did forget to do that. So let's go ahead and configure devices anyway. And right now it's not that big of a deal if it's not set up right. We'll go back and fix that once the push happens. I'll show you how to do that on a minor update. So we're going to have to push that. I'll pause until we're done. Alright, the config has been pushed, and if we look, let's go to switch 16. We're going to go to global config, router, BGP 65012. We're going to type in neighbor of 10.1.0.2, remote AS of 65012. We're going to specify the update source will be loopback 0, and then the address family IPv4. We're going to go ahead and activate that adjacency, or I should say that peering. That'll come online here in just a second. And once it does, we likely won't learn the routes. Give that a couple seconds to come up. A little slow in this lab because it is kind of busy. Okay, it was taking a couple of minutes and I noticed, I was like, well, wait a minute, that's weird. I never set the update source and I didn't set the next hop. So let's go ahead and update that real quick. So we're going to go to feature template. We'll grab, put them in order. We'll grab BGP. This should be the BGP one right here, which it is. Edit this. We'll go underneath the neighbor statement. Underneath the neighbor statement, we're going to go ahead and edit this. And we're going to go underneath the advanced options. We're going to set the source interface is going to be loopback 0. And we're going to come down to, let's see, is next hop self. We're going to say global to be on. So save changes. We're missing a value. Source interface loopback address. Oh, let me go to the name. That's my fault. So underneath here, so yeah, if you put the address in, you'll have to plug in the address. If you want the interface, you have to use the name, which will be global, which will be loopback 0, and then save changes. There we go. So update, and so we'll just double check that config. Well, I've got the config here, so we'll be able to do a quick double check. We're going to go next, config diff, and we should say update source will be loopback 0, and the next hop self will be set. So that should take care of that problem. Config diff will take a little bit longer than usual. Maybe I should have just said configure. There we go. Come down to VPN1, and we're going to add update source loopback 0 and next hop self. So I'm going to go ahead and configure devices, and then that should push down to the box pretty quickly here. Has to do like a config check to make sure everything's right. All right, so if we come in here and we do a show that, there it goes, and we should have a BGP peering with switch 16 here momentarily. As soon as that comes online, we should be good to go. And I'm a little impatient. I want things to go faster. I'm like, hurry up! So, show IP BGP summary. So let's do a show run section BGP, make sure that it's configured correctly. I wonder if I might have a configuration issue on some side. That's squared away. Let's make sure that vEdge2 10.1.16, right? That's what it's supposed to be. Oh, yeah, that's what it's supposed to be, 10.1.16. And if we do a show run VPN1, we should be calling from 10.1. Yeah, so it's advertised. Make sure it's in beat OSPF. Loopback is in OSPF, which is where it's supposed to be. Going back to switch 16. If I 10.1.2, let's ping 10.1.0.2. Okay, so that's not working. Let's say show IP OSPF neighbor. Okay, so I have a peering show IP route. Gig01. Okay, I'm learning. So I should be learning 10.1.2 on switch 16. So let's do a show IP OSPF database. And I'm learning. I'm not learning that route. Let me go back over here to vEdge2. I'll do a show OSPF interface VPN1. So I've got the loopback address being advertised. I've also got the connected link advertised. So everything looks good there. Show IP route VPN1. Gig0/2. I'm learning stuff in. Okay, everything looks right. Why is this not coming up? Switch 16. Can I ping 10.1.0.16 from VPN1? Okay, I can ping that. Can I ping it sourcing from loopback? I might have to source interface is loopback 0. Yeah, okay, so it's okay. So we have a transport issue. So the problem is that for whatever reason, when I try to ping the loopback of switch 16 and from the loopback of vEdge2, it's not being learned, and that's the problem. So I have to figure out why that's not coming up. So let's see here. Let's dive into this a little bit and see what the actual problem is. So I'm not learning 10.1. So yeah, I see this coming in. So let's look at the show IP OSPF database for the router LSA from the advertising router of 10.12.0.2. What am I learning? Okay, I'm learning the, let's see here. So I am learning the loopback. So I'm learning it. So that's good. For whatever reason, it's not being installed. So show IP route OSPF. Okay, so I'm not learning it the way that I need to be learning it. So let's do a show IP route BGP. And somehow I'm learning it via BGP from router 1. Which is a little bit weird. Why am I learning that via router 1? Interesting. Let me double check to make sure vEdge1 isn't advertising anything it shouldn't be. Show run VPN1 interface. So I've got gig 2 and gig 3, loopback 1. Show IP route VPN1. I'm learning in router 2's loopback from switch 16. Let me go back to switch 16 and let's go to global config and type in do show run OSPF. And what I want to do is I want to remove that distance command to install those BGP routes with. Let me go ahead and come underneath here, and let me do show IP interface brief. Okay, so router OSPF1, no distance 201. Okay, so let's do that real quick. So I should still see BGP routes here, which I do. If I do a show IP route, I should see 10.1.2 in here now, which is what I want to see. But if there it goes. So now I'm receiving routes. So show IP BGP summary. Whoops. Show IP BGP summary. Now I've got it. So it had to be. So I did things a little bit backwards, but those are easy things to figure out. So router 2 is now propagating routes. If I was to do show IP BGP, we're going to learn some routes in 160. We're going to learn. We should be learning more than that over from vEdge 2. Let's do a show run VPN1 router BGP 65012. I believe I'm advertising just OSPF. If I do a show IP route VPN1, there's a lot of other stuff via OMP. So what I should do is I should redistribute OMP as well. So let me go ahead and add that in real quick. Go back to templates. Let me go ahead and get out of the way. Go underneath feature template for BGP for VPN1. VPN1 right here. Yeah, you can tell because the description I give it helps me understand that. Come underneath here, edit, and then what I'm going to do for this guy is underneath the unicast address family. Couldn't spit that out actually. I'm going to go ahead and add a redistribution, and I'm going to choose OMP. I'm going to go click on add. I'm going to go ahead and update, and that's going to push that config out to there. And I'm going to edit device template. Everything looks good there. Update, and then next, and then I'm just going to go ahead and push it, because then it'll take all these routes via OMP and propagate them as well. So let's go ahead and give that a couple seconds to do its thing. And that'll get pushed down to this device. And then what I'll be able to do is I should be able to go back to router or switch 16 and get the update to push. Alright, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go back to switch 16. We can see more routes have been propagated. So show IP BGP, and so that's what I'm looking for right here. So that's exactly the operation I was looking for. So we have that going for us. Excellent. So we're in good shape there. The next thing I'm going to go do is I'm going to go and on switch 16, I'm going to go to global config, show IP route. Right now we're learning things via OSPF. And I'm going to go to global config, and I'm going to go to router OSPF1, and I'm going to type in distance is going to be, OSPF is going to be 201. For external routes will be 201. Because that's really what we need. Because if we look, because I was doing internal routes as well, and that was my mistake. So that's my fault. Because what we were doing before was we were doing intra-area routes, inter-area routes, and external routes were coming in as 201 routes. So an administrative distance of 201. And so by doing that, you can see that here OSPF external type 2, but you notice these routes right here are OSPF intra-area. So we don't want to affect those. So if we do a show IP BGP, those routes still stay in the routing table, right? So if we do a show IP route, we get our loopback addresses are configured as intra-area. So we're going to maintain our BGP peering that way, but then all the routes that come from the vEdges that are redistributed in, they get propagated in via, they get advertised into the routing table as BGP instead of OSPF. So just so everybody understands that, by setting the distance for all the route types in OSPF, we were basically preferring BGP and not OSPF, which was a bad idea. So when I removed the distance command, it automatically brought our BGP peering up to vEdge 2. By just adjusting the redistribution statement, or I should say the distance for external OSPF routes, that allows the external, the OE2 routes to get tagged with a different administrative distance, which for OSPF is going to be 201, which is going to be less preferred than BGP, and that allows the BGP routes to get injected in the routing table. So that's basically where we're at. I know a little bit of a mess, but and I do apologize about that. But some of this stuff I don't plan ahead; I just go with it. But you see me figure it out as we go. If you didn't have a strong routing background and you didn't understand those concepts, and it's not even like a CCNA thing, it's really more of a, if you have a solid CCNA, CCNP, you should be able to identify those issues. But things happen, I get it. So with that being said, we're in a good place. For the next video, we're going to go through and set up the local route policies to push them down to the appropriate devices. We're going to do that via, I'm going to show you how to do it through vEdges1, obviously CLI, then the templates, and go from there. So until next time, guys, thanks so much for stopping by, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.